organization called, great. The third sponsor is an organization called ROAR, Religious Organizations Along the River. The river in this case is the Hudson. So it's a coalition of religious congregations and other faith-based groups who educate and advocate for the waters and lands of the Hudson bioregion. And there are a few ROAR members I see on. Alice Marie Giordano was there as a member of ROAR, and I see a few others. So those are the three groups that are bringing you this series. I once heard an interviewer talking to Bill McKibben, that I'm sure we're all familiar with, a great climate advocate and founder of 350.org. And the interviewer said to him, Mr. McKibben, you're responsible for the most significant writing on climate change of our time. And Bill McKibben said, oh no, that would be Pope Francis. So with that in mind, we're thrilled that Pope Francis is inviting the church and the world.
The second box that came, not the thing itself.
Not talk now at the moment.
Then it goes right in.
Is there a way we can invite people to mute themselves, or?
I will mute all and then unmute.
Well, all right.
Father Terry.
Okay.
Do you? No, it's not.
And then how do I? Where is he?
Should be right at the top with us.
He's not.
No. Oh, then under T.
Here, I okay.
Great.
So Pope Francis is inviting the church and the world to a very ambitious 7-year journey to integral ecology and sustainability. So these three groups that I mentioned decided to sponsor a Zoom series on each of the Laudato Si action platform goals, to educate ourselves, to share experiences, and to raise enthusiasm for this very crucial project of Pope Francis. So tonight we'll engage with the first goal, response to the cry of the earth. And we are thrilled to have Eric Anglada and Brenna Cussen-Anglada to kick off our series for us. I'll introduce them more fully later, but right before they speak. But now I'd like to invite Sister Carol D'Angelo to begin with our opening prayer.
I have 4 kind of intentions, and after each one, I'll invite you, and we'll stay muted. Everyone will stay muted, but maybe Terry and Eric and Brenna can voice it for all of us so we can hear. The response is either presente or I am here. I invite you to say the response in whatever you feel is most comfortable. Presente, which means I am here. In Spanish, I'm present, or in English, I am here. Let us take a moment now to remember that we gather this evening as people of faith and goodwill who desire to care for our common home, planet Earth, its peoples, and all creation. And we say, presente.
Presente.
Let us be mindful during this season of creation to reflect on its theme, a home for all, renewing the oikos, the household of God, and ways we are called to renew, restore, and heal relationships. And we say,
Presente.
Let us acknowledge that the multi-year journey towards integral ecology and ecological conversion, which Pope Francis calls us and all Catholics to, is one where we journey in hope, love, and faith, each doing what he or she is able to, and that what we cannot do alone, we can do together. And we say, presente.
Presente.
Let us pray for open hearts, minds, and wills as we hear, listen, and explore together the first of the 7 Laudato Si goals, cry of the earth, and what our response might be. And we say, present.
Presente.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. So I don't think we could find two better people to speak to this goal of response to the cry of the earth than Eric and Brenna. Eric is with Brenna, co-founder of the St. Isidore Catholic Worker Farm in Cuba City, Wisconsin. It's a community of, I hope I have the numbers right, 6 adults and 2 children. The numbers might be off. A farm that strives to work at the intersection of food justice, community building, ecological stewardship, nonviolent resistance, and decolonization. They have a lot of free time on their hands, as you can see. That's only 4 or 5 things. Eric is also the ecological programming coordinator at Sinsinawah Mound Retreat Center run by the Sinsinawah Dominicans in Wisconsin. Brenna is also the co-founder of the St. Isidore Catholic Worker Farm, and she's one of a group called the 4 Necessity Valve Turners, a group of Catholic workers who on February 4th, 2019, closed pipeline valves of an oil pipeline in northern Minnesota, citing the imminent danger that oil pipelines and fossil fuels present to the climate. Certainly their point of view is that we have to take action, personal responsibility for the dangerous expansion of oil pipelines because the leaders in in industry and in government have not done this. So in Eric and Brenna, we have people who respond to the cry of the earth by their daily lives, learning new ways of relating to earth, our common home, and who also respond by resistance to the corporate powers that are causing what can truly be called ecocide. After their presentations, Carol will lead us in a process of sharing on what call we experience in this presentation. So please join me in welcoming Eric and Brenna.
Thanks so much. Brenna will move off screen for the time being and for my portion here. Thanks everyone for being here. It's a real honor to be asked to do this and to connect with you all good folks. As Father Terry mentioned, we are in Southwest Wisconsin. We are about 7 miles from the Great River, the Mississippi River. We are in the driftless region of the Midwest, the unglaciated region, a very rare geological region of Southwest Wisconsin. We are in a region that has been known by the Ho-Chunk, who trace their homeland to this region for over 10,000 years. They've survived the last ice age in this region, which they call the refuge, because there were not glaciers in this region 12,000 years ago. So we are on sacred land. Wherever you are tonight, you are on native land. And as you'll see, that is heavily formative of our approach to our theology, spirituality, and our everyday work. So what I'm gonna do is do a share screen here of our presentation. So hopefully everyone can see that. Tweaked Terry's titles just slightly. Cry of the Earth, a decolonial Christian response. And I'll talk a little bit about our life at St. Isidore Catholic Worker Farm in a moment. And as Father Terry said, that I work with the Sinsinawah Dominicans as the ecological programming coordinator there, about 450 acres, offering retreats and workshops and seminars all around ecology and justice, etc. I had the good fortune of getting hired just after Laudato Si was published in June 2015. So that was, I think my first event was leading a Laudato Si discussion series. And it was a document that I was just stunned by. I was just laughing in delight through much of it about how radical of an approach Pope Francis took on this, how lyrical he is with his words, and continue to return to it. And this webinar was a chance to delve into a little bit more. Oh, let me move this. So Pope Francis writes right in the opening section there, the earth herself, burdened and laid waste, is among the most abandoned and maltreated of our poor. It comes as no surprise that Pope Francis has named care for creation as one of the works of mercy, adding that to the list that we all know: visiting the prisoner, housing the homeless, feeding the hungry, etc. This is a crucial work in our day and age. And I love how he writes, well, he should have capitalized earth there, but other than that, it's a passage where the earth herself, that it's in and of itself is significant to label the earth in a pronoun as her. This is significant, not an it, not a thing, but her, a living creature. Funny and sort of sad aside, a few years ago, a friend of mine drew up a social justice Stations of the Cross that the local bishop wanted to vet, and he included the phrase Sister Earth. And the bishop said, no, you can't write Sister Earth. And then he replied with the quote from Laudato Si. And then the bishop said, okay, yeah, you can keep Sister Earth. So opens with this passage about just the cry of the earth. Now, this is a passage a little later in the text that Brenna and I have found very compelling and very important in our work. He writes, "It is essential to show special care for Indigenous communities and their cultural traditions. They are not merely one minority among others, but should be the principal dialogue partners." He adds, especially around mining projects there. But the general idea is Indigenous people are not just one partner among others, but are principal dialogue partners. And while we, fully validate and believe in dialogue amongst all religions and cultures, this has become a central passion for ours, is an interreligious, intercultural dialogue with Indigenous peoples. And that has framed a lot of our work and a lot of our reading and our listening and who we're paying attention to. Shoot. Sorry, I'm having some trouble here.
Maybe stop share for a minute. Try it again.
Sorry about that. That's the sort of kind of the mandatory technical glitch that we always have to have, right? So this is a quote from a book that we have found to be very significant from George Tinker, who's an Osage theologian, wrote this book a few years back, American Indian Liberation. He writes, "Indian peoples have experienced and continue to experience endless oppression as a result of what some would call the barbaric invasion of America. And we certainly suspect that the oppression we have experienced is intimately linked with the way the immigrants pray and how they understand creation and their relationship to creation and the creator. Whether it is the stories settlers tell or the theologies they develop to interpret those stories, something appears wrong to Indian people. So as Native people understand what's happened not only to their people, but what's happened to the land, Tinker writes, whether it is the stories settlers tell or the theologies they develop to interpret those stories, something appears wrong to Indian people. And I think this is a very profound point. I think this is a point about what were the stories that the settlers were telling themselves in order for them to not only destroy peoples, but to harm the earth, to exploit the earth. And so I think one of the major tasks that we face today in restoration of our relationships with the land and with oppressed peoples is re-story-ation. We cannot have restoration without re-story-ation. So in going back and looking at our stories, the stories that we tell that tell us how to live. And Lynn White was about 50 years ago, wrote a very influential seminal piece called The Historic Roots of Our Ecologic Crisis. It's become very well known and influential. And in that short essay, he makes the point that the ecological crisis is to be blamed on the Judeo-Christian worldview and the Western tradition and history. But he says very interestingly at the end that if the origins of our ecological crisis are religion, then the path towards right relationship, the path towards health, the path towards solving the ecological crisis must also be religious. So he says either we need to make up a new religion or we need to rethink our old one. And I think the task of rethinking our Christian tradition, of our Christian stories in light of ecological crisis is very important today. One thing I've noticed in our encounters with Indigenous peoples is they're often talking about their origin stories. Their origin stories tell them who they are and what they should be doing. It's the same thing for us as Christians. Now, Genesis 2 is actually the older of the two origin stories that we have. Just some lines that I'd like to bring out. In the day that God made the earth and the heavens, God formed man, Adam, from the dust of the ground, Adama, and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living being. And God planted a garden in Eden in the east, and there God put the man, Adam, whom God had formed. Out of the ground, Adama, God made to grow every tree that is pleasant to the sight and good for food. God took the man, Adam, and put him in the Garden of Eden to till, abad, it, and keep it. Then God said, it is not good that the man, Adam, should be alone. Help her as his partner. Now out of the ground, Adama, God had formed every animal of the field and every bird of the air. So there's a lot to unpack there. We don't have time to go fully into it, but that linguistic connection, that linguistic solidarity between Adam and Adama. So the soil creature is created out of the soil, or the earth creature is created out of the earth. The humus being is created out of the humus. There's this sense that we are made of the same stuff as the living sacred land, that we are created out of the same stuff as other animals, plants. That in that second paragraph, God planted a garden in Eden. God here is imaged as the primal gardener. So these are the kinds of stories that I think can illuminate our tasks in ecological crisis. That word till, which is a translation of abad, scholars say that more often in scriptures, that word abad is translated as to serve. So there's a sense where the Adam is created out of the Adama in order to serve the Adama. This is important and shapes our work, which I'll get into. It won't move.
Okay, yeah, somebody asked to share it in full. Maybe just explain to them that it's.
Sorry, yeah, we're unable to share the screen in full for some reason. It's not.
It's having glitches.
It's glitching up. In the Psalms, we could go, I would love to go through an hour and a half of just going through scripture and ecological reading, but I just want to hit on just a couple. In the Psalms, we have an animate world. This is integral to the Indigenous Native American worldview, is that the land is alive. And we see that reflected in the Psalms. Psalm 65, the valleys shout and sing together for joy. In Psalm 96, all the trees of the forest sing for joy before the Creator. Psalm 98, let the floods clap their hands, let the hills sing together for joy. This is amazing. This is something that isn't a common reading of scripture, that what we understand scripture is mostly being about humans are alive, but there are these currents, these undercurrents, that the natural world, the living world, is alive just as much. And in Isaiah, we see that take a political edge. Phenomenal chapter of the 14th chapter of Isaiah reads in part, you will take up this taunt song against the king of Babylon, how the oppressor has ceased, how his insolence has ceased. The whole earth is at rest and quiet. They break forth into singing. The cypresses exult over you. The cedars of Lebanon singing, since you were laid low, no one comes to cut us down. This is a tremendous ecological prophecy from Isaiah, that the people, where the land takes up a song against the oppressive king of Babylon. The whole earth breaks forth into singing, and the very cedars of Lebanon, the majestic, huge trees which had been clear cut by the empire, even the cedars of Lebanon begin singing, since you were laid low, no one comes to cut us down. A great play on words there. There's so much we could get into, but I want to skip ahead to the Catholic worker movement. In the Christian tradition, as Catholic workers ourselves, we think this movement is one of the most significant movements in the church today. And Dorothy Day is being considered for canonization in the Catholic Church. And she would be a revolutionary saint to have in the communion of saints. Dorothy Day and Peter Morin start the Catholic worker movement in 1933. They start communities all across the country. They're now all across the world. We're just one of maybe 200 communities. And they always had a vision of people living on the land. And, it's just prescient, because now we understand what's happening with our ecological crisis. And the Catholic worker movement has always had its eyes set on those on the margins, those who are most vulnerable. And today that includes very much the earth. So we are a community very much striving to live in right relationship with the land. Dorothy Day once said, I still think the only solution is the land. And Peter Morin said, we cannot be a healthy culture without a proper regard for the soil. So our farm is St. Isidore Catholic Worker Farm. This is at the entrance of the farm here, our 25-acre homestead. We are 4 adults and 2 children. We have been at various numbers at various times, but the 4 adults co-founded this community in 2016. We are named after the patron saint of farmers. Saint Isidore was an 11th century Spanish peasant who Dorothy Day, I caught an offhand reference in Dorothy Day's journals that she would love a Catholic worker farm named after Saint Isidore, patron of farmers. So we knew right then and there we had our name. His feast day is also May 15th, which is our last frost date. So it's a significant day that we always celebrate each year. And so our work day in, day out is rooted on the land. Pope Francis talks about the cry of the earth. Part of the cry of the earth is what's happening in our agricultural system. We're facing huge topsoil loss, huge herbicide and pesticides and monocultures. A lot of our ecological problems are because of our bad agriculture. So what we're trying to do on a very, very small scale is to create a different kind of agriculture on the land here. On the left, you can see the cows that call this place home. 5 cows, including the one closest to me. I just took that picture this morning. Is Flora, a milk cow that we milk, and is a lovely part of the community and very integral part of the community. And if we graze our livestock right, if we have them on grass, if we move them around, we are building up the life in the soil. We are treating the soil as it's sacred, as something that we need to treat with respect. And these cows are an integral part. They're collaborators in a sense in our pursuit of ecological living. On the right, you can see one of our gardens. We do no-till gardening. We have extensive gardens. We don't bring any machines on them. We just use hand tools. And you can see this is a garden that is teeming with life. We have peppers there, we have flowers, we have broccoli in the background. So we preserve a lot of food here. We give some of it away, we sell some of it. And we think it's just really, really important for us to be more connected with our food. And our aim is to be eating at least 50% of our diet coming from the land here. Generating biodiversity. This is another one of Pope Francis's keys that we're facing, is the loss of biodiversity across the world. So again, very micro scale. On the left side, we are gradually taking up our lawn and putting in native plants. So there you can see black-eyed Susans, you can see purple coneflower in the back. We have butterfly weed that's gone to seed. So that's what we're trying to generate, more and more life through deep-rooted native plants that are sinking water, that are attracting native life. And there on the right side is a 3-year-old bur oak tree. And this land, before it was colonized, was an oak savanna. So it would have featured prairie, extensive prairie, native plants, flowers and grasses, with occasional huge bur and white oak trees. And it just so happens that oaks are a really keystone species, that so many more creatures rely on the oak, hundreds more than any other tree. Doug Tallamy has done a lot of great ecological writing and work. He's out in Pennsylvania about, if you're gonna do one thing, anything in your yard, plant an oak tree. The oak tree is the key to bringing back native species, more life, microorganisms. Regenerative living and renewable energy. This is other pieces of the broader puzzle. You can see, obviously, we have solar panels. That was one thing that we, when we moved in 2016, we pretty much, within a few months, moved quickly to install solar panels. So actually generating energy. And that's our goal on the land, is to generate more and more life, more and more energy. In front of the panels there, you can see milkweed. So that's a prairie plant that the monarch butterfly relies on. So all of these things are connected and integrated and are vitally important. Again, all very much on a small scale, but we're pretty passionate and excited about doing this. As Pope Francis says, an integral ecology is made up of simple daily gestures which break with the logic of violence, exploitation, and selfishness. So that's just in brief what the ways that we're trying to engage the cry of the earth here on the land. What Brenna is going to do is talk about an action that she took off the farm. And you want to, I don't think we have time. We do.
It ties into it. So.
Okay. Well, I'm going to share one last piece here. This is a Soul Fire Farm project some of you have hopefully heard of. Maybe, to my mind, the most significant farm land project in the United States that has been started by Leah Penniman, who wrote a really important, excellent book called Farming While Black. And they're a community of Black and Indigenous and Latinx farmers in upstate New York. And they have invited in dozens, maybe hundreds of different people, BIPOC folks, Black, Indigenous, and people of color, who are interested in returning to the land and being more engaged in food production, in healthy ecological practices. And so all of these people have come through there and have started projects. Black and Indigenous farmers have started projects across the country, and they're asking for reparations. They're asking for support. And as we're trying to do our own small scale work on the land, we want to also be engaged in the wider community with special attention to those who have been oppressed and systematically denied of labor. And in our Christian tradition, who can we think of that might be a patron saint of reparations? Jennifer Harvey suggests that man would be Zacchaeus. Luke 19, Zacchaeus, when he meets Jesus, is inspired to not only give away half of his possessions, but to pay back fourfold all of those for whom he extorted or exploited. So Jennifer Harvey says white privileged Christians should be asking themselves not WWJD, but WWZD. What would Zacchaeus do? And so Zacchaeus, I think, offers us an inspiration to take our privilege and to support those on the margins, those who have been systematically oppressed. So let's just take a breather while I turn this over to Brenna.
Hi all. Again, apologies for the lack of our ability to. I know we shared the full screen, but then we couldn't move to the next slide. So it's I'm going to do a little more of that, and I'll try one more time to make it full. But if it doesn't, that's why we're. I apologize that it's not as beautiful as it could be. So as Father Terry introduced and as Eric explained, so we're out of this love for the land on which we live, and kind of everything that Eric shared about our desire here to live in right relationship with creation. Along with our budding realization that as descendants of settlers on this land, we had a responsibility to act not only on the side of creation, but also on the side of justice for the original peoples of this land, who have historically lived in a much better relationship with creation, not to make them seem like, anyway, they
Not
have
to
not to
over-idealize.
over idealize anybody, but historically they have lived in better relationship with creation than our own culture, the culture that I come from. So in the Midwest, Eric talked a little bit about our participation in the Catholic worker movement. That's where our community stems from. In the Midwest, it's been a tradition for the last 20 or so years that Catholic worker communities get together for a long weekend each spring to learn about a local issue of justice that a particular Catholic worker community is working on. And then as a larger community from all over the Midwest, we offer support and often take direct action in support of the justice issue that a particular community is working on. And so in 2018, we had the opportunity, we were invited by the Hildegard House Catholic Worker in Duluth, Minnesota, which is about an 8-hour drive, 6 to 8 hour drive north of where we live. It's a house of hospitality run by Michelle and Greg Obed. And they wanted to host that year's, we call them the Faith and Resistance Retreat. And they offered to host it for about 100 or so Catholic workers came to join. Just a little bit about Hildegard House. It began as a place of hospitality, refuge, and healing for women and girls who had been harmed by sexual trafficking. And as Michelle and Greg got deeper into this work, they soon learned that women and girls who are harmed by sexual trafficking are disproportionately Native American women and girls. They are disproportionately impacted by this crime. And so as Michelle and Greg were getting deeper into the work of combating sexual trafficking, trying to help provide a place where people could heal from that, they found themselves in contact with a lot of activists, primarily Native women, a lot of Ojibwe women who were working to stop sexual trafficking. These same women, these same activists were very upset when they learned that Enbridge Energy, which is a Canadian corporation, wanted to expand their pipeline through northern Minnesota. And as a lot of these Native communities have understood for a long time, whenever there are new construction projects, particularly pipeline projects of the fossil fuel industry, whenever these construction projects come up, a lot more Native women and girls, and sometimes boys also, are disproportionately raped. They go missing and are turned up murdered. Unfortunately, pipeline construction is largely done by male workers who are from out of state, who are away from their families, often have no ties, are working long hours in a generally a pretty unhealthy culture of drinking, drug abuse. And in that environment, a lot of sexual assault takes place, and again, disproportionately impacting Native women, girls, and boys. So I mention this because the title of this talk is The Cry of the Earth. And as Eric mentioned, Pope Francis in his encyclical Laudato Si closely aligns the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor. And this is one very poignant example of where the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor are so intricately related. When there are pipeline projects going through land, destroying land, a people who's been historically oppressed in this society for the last 500 years experiences more violence. I have also read, Eric mentioned Jennifer Harvey. She's a wonderful theologian, and I have read by her, she talks about how ecocide and genocide just so often go hand in hand, because it's a similar mindset. When we can view the earth as a commodity, we also view the people who originally belonged to that land in a similar mindset. And so when violence to our earth happens, you're often going to find violence against the people who belong to that earth happening. So I am going to try this screen share again, and let's see how it goes. This is a map of northern Minnesota. The red line is the old Enbridge Energy Line 3 that carries tar sands oil from Alberta, Canada to Superior, Wisconsin. The black line with the white dots is the new line that unfortunately now is pretty much complete. It's not exact, this map is from 2016, so it's pretty much accurate. But I chose this map because I really wanted to show you how when Michelle and Greg back in 2018 thought about having our Catholic Worker Faith and Resistance retreat up there, and they had been working with Ojibwe communities from Ojibwe women and activists from these reservations, White Earth, Leech Lake, Red Lake, Fond du Lac. They were also learning about, so although you can kind of see Fond du Lac, Leech Lake, White Earth, Red Lake, those are Ojibwe nations, reservations. But the light green all around them, that is all what those communities understand to be treaty territory. When Ojibwe communities signed treaties with the United States, letting the United States government use that land, in the treaties they wrote, like in this particular area was mostly done in 1855. They made sure to write in there that they would allow us they would allow the US government the use of that, the rest of that land in green, even though it wasn't part of the actual reservation boundaries. They would allow us to use the rest of that land in green as long as they retained their what are called usufructory rights. But anyway, it means their right to hunt, the right to fish, the right to gather their medicines, and wild rice, which is particularly sacred to those communities, wild rice, which they called manumin. So that is written in the treaties, which are the highest in the US Constitution, say is the highest law of the land. So when Enbridge Energy says we want to dig up this land, and it shouldn't matter because it's not on your reservation land, Native people say it does matter because this is written in our treaty that you cannot endanger our right to hunt, fish, gather, and continue the way we've been living for thousands and thousands of years. So that is going to be an ongoing battle in the courts. Since 2015, these Native communities were fighting against this pipeline, knowing that destroying this land could destroy, here's a picture of a Ojibwe woman talking about her right to rice, her right to gather wild rice, again, manumin, something that's been sacred to the Ojibwe people for at least 15,000 years. An oil spill would cause monumental destruction to these wild rice beds. This is from the Honor the Earth website, which is founded by Winona LaDuke, an Ojibwe woman, and other environmentalists. She says, as Anishinaabe, which is another kind of often used interchangeably with Ojibwe, as Anishinaabe, our treaties with the US government guarantee tribal members the right to harvest, hunt, fish, travel, and preserve cultural sites within our treaty territory. New pipeline proposals from Enbridge violate our treaty rights and put our relationship to our land, its health, and our communities at risk. Our manumin, or wild rice, is our sacred food, central to who we are as Anishinaabe. We are honoring our covenant with the Creator. We are protecting our land and our wild rice as our ancestors did before us. And just a little background on Enbridge Energy, again, a Canadian company that has taken public land and treaty land in Minnesota, that Minnesota has given permission to them to do. This is one of their spills. They have not had a great track record of oil spills. This is, Enbridge was the source of the largest ever inland oil spill in the United States in 1991 in Grand Rapids, Minnesota, right by where this new pipeline is going through. Enbridge has a history of many spills. Since 2002, they've reported more than 300 hazardous liquids incidents, which means 1 every 20 days. And at least 46 of those were due to equipment that was less than 10 years old. So it's not due to old equipment. So even though Enbridge was saying, oh, this is a replacement project, we need safer pipelines, you saw from the maps that it wants to go on the new pipeline is going on a completely new route. The new pipeline will send, Enbridge will be able to send more than double the amount of tar sands oil that it was sending through the old pipeline. And another proof that it's not interested in a replacement project is that the old pipeline is staying in the ground. The old corroding pipeline is not being removed from the ground. It's staying in the ground to just rot and continue corroding in the ground. And here's another image of tar sands, toxic waste lakes or tailing ponds in Alberta, Canada, which cover the size of Washington, D.C. So this tar sands is crude oil. It hasn't been refined yet. It gets shipped from Alberta to Superior, Wisconsin, so where it will be refined for use. And for this particular pipeline project, it will likely be sold overseas to foreign markets because there is not a market. Minnesota Department of Commerce agreed that there is no market in the United States for tar sands oil. It's one of the worst contributors to climate change. It's a very dirty form of oil. It's a particularly form of dirty crude oil. So for all these reasons, the fact that it's particularly dirty, that this new pipeline is crossing over 200 wetlands and streams in Minnesota, including the Mississippi River twice. They drilled under the Mississippi River twice in the last few months to put this new pipeline in. For all of these reasons, Native nations such as the Red-Legged Band of Chippewa, the White Earth Band of Ojibwe, as well as other environmental organizations, again, have been fighting this battle in court since 2014, taking every legal action they possibly could, including, and Michelle of Hildegard House was working with them. And so in 2018, April of 2018, Michelle invited about 100 other Catholic workers to come up to Duluth, Minnesota, where we learned about the issue over the course of a weekend from Native lawyers, Native activists, environmental leaders, spiritual leaders. We learned about the issue, and then we non-violently occupied an illegal Enbridge pipe yard. You can see us standing in front of these pipes. All of these pipes were stored in this pipe yard illegally. Enbridge had not gotten the permission that it needed to put these pipes in the yard. And so we wanted to expose that they had already moved their pipes into the state before even getting permission from the state to build this pipeline. So we exposed them. We risked arrest in doing so because we were trespassing on that land, but none of us were arrested that day, though we occupied the yard for a full day. 2 months later, after many hearings, the Public Utilities Commission in Minnesota opened about 7 public hearings around the state. 72,000 people came to those public hearings in Minnesota to say whether or not they wanted the pipeline to come through the area. Out of those 72,000, 68,000 spoke out against the pipeline. So 94% of people who spoke at these hearings, 94% of them said, we do not want this pipeline in our state. And yet still the 5-member Public Utilities Commission in June of 2018 gave Enbridge permission to rip through sacred wild rice beds that are sacred to Anishinaabe people, to rip through public lands, to endanger the Mississippi River, which is so central to so many of us in this country, and to endanger lots of water in the area. So 2 months after that, in August of 2018, Michelle, who you can see her, she's this cute short lady holding the Honor the Treaties sign on the one side of it. She invited me, and she put out the invitation to several other Catholic workers to take a more risky action. She had heard of other people, both in Canada and the United States, calling themselves the valve turners, people who, in order to protest pipelines, went to pipeline valve sites and actually physically shut them off. She asked if we would be willing to do something like that. And so 4 of us, Allison Pullman, Daniel Yildirim, myself, and Michelle, said yes, we want to do that. And several others joined us as our support team. They wanted to work with us, though they wouldn't be the ones going inside the fence. So over the course of several months, I'm going to show you some of that's the 4 of us plus some of our support team. You can see that there's a little altar there. We spent many months meeting up with each other in prayer. This was a very prayerful action. We talked about how we could support one another should the consequences be steep. Should we get several years of prison, which we knew was possible. We prayed. Not all of us were Catholic, but we often prayed in the Catholic tradition. We prayed the rosary, we sang songs together. Again, just a very prayerful preparation and action. And on the morning of February 4th, 2019, on a very cold morning, we set out to Blackberry, Minnesota, and the 4 of us used bolt cutters to cut a chain to get into this valve yard. We had already scoped out the property beforehand, and we knew that the valves to both lines 3 and 4, which were both tar sands oil pipelines, we knew they were both in this yard. When we got there, we made sure that we were going to physically be able to shut off the valve if Enbridge wouldn't themselves, which proved to be a little trickier than we thought. But we called Enbridge the company as soon as we got inside, and we said, if you don't shut down this pipeline remotely, then we will. We are prepared to do so. So they did. It was a little miracle. We were in there for about an hour and a half. And while we were in there, we saw the valve stem going down, the pressure gauge going down, and we knew that both lines 3 and lines 4 had been shut off, and there was no tar sands flowing through those pipelines that day. We hung signs, a sign, I'll show the next slide. We hung a sign, this is from the UN climate report, the IPCC, that was put out, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, that was put out in October of 2018. This is a quote from that. The time is now for unprecedented and urgent action. So we hung this banner on the fence. We hung rosaries, prayer ties, Buddhist prayer flags, prayer items, prayer that people, sacred items that people had sent to us from all around the country for that original pipeline action in April of 2018. We had saved those and we brought them with us, and we hung them on the fence. We hung them on the actual valve stem sleeve. We invoked the saints. We sang, and the lines were shut off. We later learned that 6 pipelines were shut down that day while we were inside, because Enbridge wasn't sure if we were telling the truth or not, and if we would try anything different. So they shut down 6 lines that day. Police arrived and arrested us, and we spent about 48 hours in jail, which we were not surprised by. What we were surprised by is that we were released from jail without bail. We were charged with both a felony and a misdemeanor. The felony was for aiding and abetting attempted damage to pipeline property. I'll go back here, which carried with it a maximum of 5 years in prison and a $10,000 fine, and also a misdemeanor. We were hoping to use the necessity defense in court, which I'll just try to explain briefly. We were not able to use it. The necessity defense basically goes something like this. If a house is on fire and there's a child inside, and you break the law by trespassing on the property of the house and destroying property by breaking the window, because your goal is to save the child who's in the burning house, then you can't really be convicted of those crimes because you were breaking a smaller law to achieve a greater good. Well, our argument is that the world is on fire. All of these destructive things are happening with this pipeline. And we should not be charged with the crime. We should not be convicted of a crime because our action was necessary. We were not allowed to use that defense in court. The judge decided to not let us use that defense in court. And due to COVID, our trial, we waited for about 2.5 years for our trial, which just happened in July. By the time we got to that trial, the felony had been dropped and we were just charged with a misdemeanor, which we were found guilty of. We were convicted of the misdemeanor and we received almost no consequences. The jury was quite moved by our action, but still found us guilty. I'm gonna just move along here I'm just gonna close with, so the fight against Line 3 has been going on since that action by amazing people from all walks of life, have been joining Indigenous-led camps that are led by Indigenous women all across northern Minnesota. And those started being really active last November when active construction began. People have been sitting in trees to stop them from being cut down. People have been chaining themselves to equipment. Over 600 people, a lot of them young people, a lot of people in their 20s, but also older people, all walks of life. Over 600 have been arrested in trying to stop this pipeline. The pipeline is pretty much complete now, but they're hoping there's a chance oil won't flow through it. This is a picture that I took I spent about 5 weeks at those camps this last December. Or sorry, this last winter. And this is a picture I took last December on the solstice, the longest night and shortest day of the year. So on the solstice, many people, several hundred of us marched down the street and faced the security vehicles and the construction equipment that were poised to drill under the Mississippi River. We marched down the street and several people had donned these beautiful costumes of reindeer with, you can see on the back, each of these reindeer have an image of someone from creation, like a bear that goes with the word honor, a golden eagle that says beloved, a wolf that says protect. Nabi that's the Ojibwe word for water, is Nabi. You can see a couple down, Manuman, that's again the sacred wild rice. So all of these beings were being represented in facing the military vehicles and facing the security and facing the construction equipment to say, we are here, we're trying to block you from doing this destructive act. And as we marched down the street and we solemnly faced the equipment for a while, I'm going to show another picture. We faced them for a while and kind of drummed in a solemn way. And then we turned and people started playing more joyful music and we participated in a round dance, which is a traditional native dance. And all of these beings, the Nabi, the wild rice, the Manuman, the water, the bear, the golden eagle, the wolf, they all danced with us. So I'm going to stop there because it's a little after 7. And I think we can open it for discussion.
Thank you. So we had a very rich past, a little bit less than an hour with your sharing. So thank you very much, Eric and Brenna. When Terry and I were talking about how we thought the conversation should go afterwards, you might have questions you do want to ask Erin and Brenna, but we thought the way we might like to have the conversation is to really also hear the wisdom of this group. And I know that Eric and Brenna were helping us in their sharing to help us maybe be more aware of the way in which we worded, and it's on the flyer that you saw. What call did I hear from Brenna and Eric's sharing? what call did I hear that will move me, us further on this path towards ecological conversion? And we know that many times in the hearing and the listening to another person, that then helps widen it to the we. So if we can just take a moment now, just take a moment before we open this up to sharing. As you were listening to Eric and Brenna, what might have moved you? Is there something that stirred within you? Was there a new insight, perhaps, that that kind of came up? Perhaps you saw something with new eyes. So just take a moment to see what stirred up with you and what you might want to share, either through the chat or verbally on this Zoom. And I'll talk in a moment on how we'll do that. But just take a moment. I'm just going to be quiet for a moment to allow us to experience in quiet the richness that you, Eric, and Brenna just shared from your life experience and from the stories you told. So I have about 7:06 on my computer. We're ending around 7:30. Again, I invite you, if you want to, you can put some of your insights or how you felt moved, how you felt called to put in the chat box. But I'm hoping everyone on this call knows how to raise their hand, and I'm hoping also that Eric and Brenna and Terry will help me to see, because if you don't know how to raise your hand, you might be waving. But if you are on a computer and you click on reactions, there's a lower bar that says raise hand. And usually when you raise your hand, you'll come to the top of the screen and I'll see you, or Eric and Brenna and Terry will see you. So I'm inviting people who want to share something to raise their hand. I'm asking that also so that we can give each other time to talk. Maybe we won't have that many, but just try to keep it as brief as you can in your sharing. And if for some reason I will scroll through to see if there are people who cannot raise their hand, because I know sometimes iPads make it difficult and all that. So would anyone like to begin in sharing? Oh, I see Roberta. Yes, Roberta. And is it Eric and Brenna, do you have to help people unmute, or
No, they should be able to do that on their own.
good.
It looks like Roberta and Donna.
Okay, Roberta and Donna. Okay, well, all right. Since Roberta is unmuted now, why don't you begin and then Donna? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Carol. I think I did not realize what Brenna was sharing in terms of the trafficking of and the abuse of the children of the indigenous peoples that live in that area. I was not aware that that was taking place. I've seen many, on my computer, different groups of Native Americans who are protesting at sites, and I have tried to advocate for them by writing to congressional people with regard to stopping this, but that saddens me that is also a piece of this horrific puzzle that we're trying to break the pieces apart. Thank you.
Thank you, Roberta. Thank you. Donna?
Yes, first of all, thank you so much. Your sharing was most inspiring. But I just want to comment on the part when, Eric, you mentioned that the ecological crisis can be blamed on Western Judeo-Christian religions. How true. And I guess, you don't often hear that, but when you mentioned the solution has to be religious, I just, that call from Francis, we have a very crucial, not only niche, but piece in this, in the solution, in the journey to this, this climate crisis, without a doubt. But when you mentioned that, that really just hit, you know, our abuse of colonialism, of racism, of just everything. And so the solution, we are the solution, we have the solution. You know, we need to move forward with an urgency, but certainly with the faith base. I thank you. I just want to say also, Doug Talamay, a hero of mine, and planting natives is so crucial to the natural habitat. And we're attempting to do that here in Scranton with a lot of our
Land.
and networking with other folks. Thanks so much.
Yeah, Talamy hits on the real small scale, the little things you can do. A great little book called Nature's Best Hope is really worth checking out. And also, I just wanted to say too, since so many of you are from religious communities, that I think not only is the ecological crisis at bottom spiritual, but I think the actual land that you all are on, and as communities are decreasing and looking towards sharing, the potential collaborations of religious communities utilizing their land and opening that up for Indigenous or Black or Latinx communities is really exciting, and I think potentially really incredible, and could be part of the ecological conversion. Alice Marie looks like is next.
Yes. A few years ago, a few of us visited Soulfire Farm, and we were really impressed with the community that built up there and how many people they educated in this farming. And I'm wondering if you are building up community around your farm, and I'm wondering what you think about the increase of small farms. You know, we've lost so many family farms in the building up of big agriculture. I wonder if you think there is a hope for small farm to emerge through this Indigenous farming and closer to the land.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to take that, or should I? Well, yeah, we do. I mean, we're not nearly as impressive as what Soulfire Farm is doing, that's for sure. But we do host regular workshops, regular gathering, where we're trying to expose as many people as we can to this alternative way of life and be a model. And land access is huge. And to kind of go back to that previous topic of the religious communities, we were only able to create our land project here because of the financial investment of religious communities, particularly the Sisters of Charity of the Blessed Virgin Mary in Dubuque gave us a very substantial no interest loan. And that's what I mean. I think with your resources and your ecological vision, there are really possibilities, as we have very much seen in our own lives. It was a life-changing loan, and there's a number of religious communities who gave us outright donations, and we really encourage. And so we feel a special privilege because we are so privileged to be on this land, to share it and to work in a posture of reparations and supporting Black and Indigenous folks.
I notice, also just take a moment to read the chat. I know Lou Doyle has said something, and she kind of emphasized, I don't know, Lou, if you want to say it yourself, but the whole idea of us re-examining our Judeo-Christian stories, how important that is. I liked also, and Lou mentions it, Eric and Brenna, the re-story-ation.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I like that play on words.
Mm-hmm.
Pat Reynolds.
Oh, yes, Pat and Eileen. Okay, Pat Reynolds. I don't.
You're muted, Pat.
And then Roberta again, I see your
Okay,
hand.
but Eileen McGrory after Pat, I think she was trying to say something too. Yeah. Okay. Oh,
She's gonna. Who's first?
Go ahead, Pat.
Oh, this is a minor thing. First of all, I'm in awe of the two of you. Thank you so much. But when you made the comment about oak trees, I couldn't help but think whoever planted trees on these grounds, if you go down our back door, we have northern oaks. If you go out the front door and walk down the pathway, you have the pin oaks. So someone along the way must have known that. And I had always heard from Arbor Day each year, they have a big thing on the hazelnut bushes as one of the best things for the environment. But from now on, I'll give oak seedlings for people that move to new homes. Thank you so much.
Yeah, yeah.
Beautiful, thank you. Eileen, did you want to say something? Eileen,
Yes, yes, very simple. The presentation really moved me to include people like yourselves in my prayer. If that's at least what I can do from the concrete streets of New York City. But I certainly will make that a part of my prayer, that there are people like yourselves out there, shall we say first responders of another kind. And so just would like you to know that. And to remind myself to do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Wow.
Thank you.
Very powerful.
Yeah, I just want to, well, really express my gratitude for that. And particularly because I am a strong believer in prayer, more so as I get older. Yeah, while we were in that pipeline yard and had called Enbridge and you know, no plans are perfect. So we had some glitches along the way, and we just continually invoked the saints and ancestors, those who had gone before us. And it was right when Michelle was, you know, I was live streaming the event, and right as she was particularly invoking saints, and we had just finished kind of a litany of saints calling on their help. And just as she was sort of re-expressing this and talking into the video, that Enbridge, we saw the pressure gauge go down, and Enbridge shut off the valve for that line 4, and we later found out also line 3. And yeah, we thought about it as nothing short of miraculous. So how much the power of prayer, yeah, again, just big believers. So thank you.
Thank you.
And I see
Eleanor, thank you. Eleanor, I see you have your hand raised. Yes.
Yes. First, I want to thank you for your presentations. Very, very powerful and moving. I have been aware of the harm done to the Indigenous peoples, the women and children, when these undertakings are happening in the native lands. I've been aware of that several times with different webinars, and yes, to pray that these pipelines and these fossil fuels disappear and that people are safe. But I'm just wondering if there is some, I live on the East Coast, New York, upstate, some way that myself or others can do something more active. It's specifically focused to help this issue, this harm.
Yeah, so I don't know of specific projects on the East, but I know they're still happening, and there are still native-led protests against fossil fuel industry, even on the East Coast. I know I've heard a few in the last few years. I can't think of a specific one right now, but there are a lot of chapters. There's a group called MMIW, standing for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women. It's sometimes MMIWR, Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Relatives, because it's not always women. it is sometimes young boys and girls who are impacted. And those groups are getting stronger. There's a lot of local chapters around the country, and I'm not sure where they are on the East Coast, but even if you find somebody on the East Coast that you could be in contact with, I'm guessing that they would be able to put you in touch with local folks who could point you in the right direction.
And it's also significant that Biden named the Department of Interior Deb Haaland, and so she's doing things around the boarding school issue, and I wouldn't be surprised if she's doing things around the MMIW issue to try to link into that. It's not exactly MMIW, but just that Soul Fire farm that I mentioned, we showed that reparations map, and they're on their website. They have a map all over the country of different projects who are looking for support.
Thank you. Thank you.
Eric and Brenna, can you put into the chat the website that you just mentioned? You know, just so that we have it, because if we save the website, then we'll have it.
Sure.
And Eleanor, I don't know if this was exactly also part of your question. You know, I think many of the actions that those of us, Roar, for instance, are taking, Dam's Camera, Stop the Dam's Camera Dam, the Astoria project, certainly the pipeline actions that we've taken in our area to stop pipeline expansion, because there's several of them, the Algonquin, which, you know, unfortunately went through, but many of them going through New York City. So all that I think is related to this issue too, because it does, in a sense, kind of connect with what's happening in terms of how we care for the land and how it's affecting the people. So,
Right.
yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for that website. Okay, good. Any other comments? Any other sharings of what people are doing? This is the first, as Terry said in the beginning, the first of our series, and we're hoping that as we keep on hearing from each other and the conversations, that somehow this might even help us see how we can move more towards a collective action in terms of responding to each of the Laudato Si goals, at least to give us ideas. Any other thoughts?
Someone's got a lot of background.
I wonder if it's me, huh? If
Just try muting yourself, Carol.
okay.
Yep, that was it. Sorry to cut you off, Carol.
No, that's okay. I wonder if there was a wire or something. Okay. Is it still there?
Yes.
Well, somebody asked how do we support
Oh,
it?
someone asked about the financial piece,
of our own work.
how we do our
Should
own
we
work.
ask Carol to-
Carol, if you could mute, yeah, there you go.
To originally purchase this land, we got support both from religious communities and from our families. And we're still paying off a no interest loan, but it's actually 4 adults and 2 children who live here permanently. We have had other adults live with us, but since COVID, it's just been our 2 families. And some of the 4 adults, we have part-time jobs. So we don't really make money on our farm. Sometimes people send us small donations, but for the most part, we work part-time jobs, and that's how we bring in our work, money to support what we do financially.
But we're able to do that because of living in community.
Yeah.
And so we're
Keep
able to
costs
keep
low.
costs low and share resources and meet a lot of our needs. We heat and cook with wood in the winter time, so we don't have any heating costs, and with the solar panels and those kinds of things. And so we do intentionally make below the taxable income to be more we're tax resistors in the Catholic worker tradition. Pat Sullivan.
Yes, this doesn't have to do with the pipeline. It has to do with the fact how important the soil is to climate. And there is a wonderful documentary on Netflix. Many of you may have seen it, called Kiss the Earth, or
Kiss the Ground.
Kiss the Ground.
Kiss the Ground, yeah.
Kiss the Ground. If you have a chance to look at that, it's really, it made me realize how important even what you're doing with farming and the way you're farming is so important to the climate. And if we could do more of that, that's one of the answers. But it's a wonderful documentary. I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, narrated by Woody Harrelson, of all people.
Yes.
Yeah, in a healthy tablespoon of topsoil, moist soil, there's about 1 billion microorganisms. So there's so much more going on beneath the surface. So yeah, we compost everything. We turn everything to the soil. What our chickens don't eat returns to the soil, and we put back onto the gardens. We compost everything.
But just the way you, not using any till or anything, they show, how they just have that little line, and it works wonders. It works, we think that we need all this other stuff for good farming, and we don't.
Yep.
Thank you.
And thanks. I noticed someone put a link to Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women, a website, in the chat. Thanks for that.
Well, thank you. If there's any other comments, because what I'll do then is hand it over to Terry. Okay.
Okay. Eric and Brenna, thank you so much. As you can see, everyone was moved and intrigued and enthused by your presentation. And, I think it came through so clearly that you're ordinary people. You're not super people, but just decided to live with integrity in relationship with Earth, in relationship with all the other creatures with whom you share land, and in relationship with the history of the land, and also to engage in resistance. To say that I have to take a stand about this. It's not leaving the future of the world, as we so often do, in the hands of the big people. Certainly a marvelous inspiration to all of us, that ordinary people can do extraordinary things in shifting this dangerous story we've lived out of to a life that's whole and healthy, and frankly much more joyful than the life that most of our fellow citizens of the United States are living. So thank you so much for your presentation, but even more for the example of your lives. And both Eric and Brenna are marvelous writers. So if you Google both of them, you'll be able to find things that they've written and further enjoy their marvelous insights and way of expressing themselves. Brenna wrote a beautiful reflection on the Assumption and what it says about matter in the Christian tradition. And I use it every August 15th in my homily on the Assumption. So thank you for that. This, as I said, is the first of our series. All the next 6 talks are all going to be on first Mondays. We couldn't do it the first Monday in September because of Labor Day. So the next first Monday, which is coincidentally the Feast of St. Francis, October 4th, we'll look at the second of Pope Francis's Laudato Si action plan goals, our response to the cry of the poor. And we've already touched on that. You can't separate these things, obviously. Our presenter will be Dr. Daniel Kosaki, who is a professor of religious studies and director of Peace and Justice Studies program at Marywood University in Scranton, Pennsylvania, the University, sponsored by Donna Corbett's community, the Immaculate Heart Sisters of Scranton. Dan also is a tremendous presenter and very knowledgeable about making those connections between, as Pope Francis says, we don't have two crises, one ecological and one economic. They're both, they're two sides of the same coin. So Dan will help us to enter into that. So next, the first Monday of October 4th, again, 6 to 7:30 p.m. Thank you all. It's really inspiring, again, to see people from both coasts and in between. So thank you for your presence. And if Eric and Brenna, if you'd like to say some last words. You don't have
Well, one mundane one is I noticed in the chat, someone's asking how they can access the recording. So I would like to ask you that.
I would like to know myself.
Okay.
Since I hope you'll be able to get it to me in some way because they recorded it. Do you know
It's
how
recorded to the cloud, so you should be able to access it on your Zoom account.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll have further information. Will be forthcoming.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, just thank you so much. It's an honor to be with you all. We're really humbled by the invitation and excited to be part of this great turning. The event what Joanna Macy calls the adventure of our time is this shift from an industrial destructive way of life into a life-sustaining civilization. And it's very exciting and it's an adventure, and blessed to be on the pilgrimage with you all. Thank you.
Before we go though, I think it might be good to say, because with the recording, Terry, usually the recordings, if we can't get them up on a website or anything, I think these recordings are only good for a week, 10 days. So, we've been trying to see how we can get either someone who has a YouTube channel or something where we can get recordings up. So if anyone has any ideas, let us know. But what I think we might say, if anyone really wants a recording to this and would be able to listen to it within the week, then maybe you should email either Terry or me, because we won't know, who wants it. We do have to figure that out, because we might not be able to keep.
So Carol and Terry, maybe you should put your emails in the chat
I'll do
just
that.
to make sure that people.
And also, Eric, would you mind sharing your PowerPoint with us?
Sure.
Yeah, we can
Absolutely.
do that.
Mhm.
Yep, because there are a few slides actually we didn't get to.
Okay, so I just put.
Oh yeah.
I am the host now.
Yep.
Roberta?
Is there a way also to get, I see that some people have put in the chat some links, some websites and things like that. Is there a way to collect them or?
Yeah, if you email Carol or me, we'll make sure you get the recording, the PowerPoint, and the chat.
Chats. Okay, thank you.
Because we don't have any other way of, because people didn't register, so we have no idea who you are. I know who you are, but.
I know who you are too.
They just let anyone in on here?
Just let anyone in, and how well behaved they were.
If anybody wants to chat, they can save it by just opening the chat and going to the 3 dots, and it'll say save chat, and you'll have everything on your computer or desktop. Just do save chat.
Got it. Thank you.
That's what I found out is the easiest way to keep it.
Good.
Do we have an email for Eric and Brenna?
Terry does.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I will, anyone who contacts me, I will. Do you mind, Eric?
No, not at all. I'd love to be in touch.
Okay. You may regret that.
No.
Okay, any other technical questions?
Yes, how was that you got the chat again? Could you just say that one more time?
Would whoever explain that about the chat?
Good night, everyone.
I'm muted, so all you have to, I think I'm unmuted now. All you have to do is open chat.
Right?
And if you go down to the bottom right, there's 3 dots.
Either
And
that or file. On
Yeah.
mine, it's file.
Okay, if you click on it, that's when you can get save chat, or I would guess there's a file you can do too.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you all to everyone and hope to see you on October 4th. Good night.
Thank you.